I'll move on so that with a bit of luck we don't have too many people asleep by the time I finish. So moving on, part two is whereas part one was slanted more towards soaring as such, part two is slanted towards cross country. I love flying cross country. In fact, in many ways, flying cross country is easier than local soaring, because once you decide you're going to break that umbilical to the airfield, you don't have to think about am I in gliding range of anything anymore. You just go to where it's soarable and climb up and soar and have a flight, whereas you wouldn't. And we fly from Limpsfield, which often sits in the sea air from the Severn Valley, and sometimes it's just impossible to stay within gliding range and soar. So to soar, you've got to get out of gliding range, climb up to get high enough to come back through the sea air. So it's great. So cross-country flying, I'm much in favour of it. So what I'm going to talk about this time, some top tips if you like, common errors, and we'll have a question and answer session if we have time. I'm a great believer in preparing well before going cross-country flying, and I really like to sort my equipment out. I really can't perform just by driving in the gate in a hurry and sort of throwing the glider together and then going flying. I have to be a bit more organised than that. And I like to make sure that everything's in place. That's the glider, the trailer, and all my personal stuff. And I also like to make sure I've got a retrieve arrangement. Nothing worse than going cross country with no known way of getting back today if it all goes wrong. So yeah, fortunately, Pammy will often turn out for me, but if Pammy's not there, I've got a list. In fact, like most other clubs, I'm sure, but we have a sort of retrieve syndicate. A whole bunch of us have got each other's phone numbers, and basically the deal is that any of us will go and get anybody else if they phone us, and we're back. So that's the arrangement. Fortunately, I can manage not to answer the phone quite often. Yeah, well, where we live, we're in a mobile phone flat, fortunately. I've got a lot to get people. And of course you never know when it's going to be your day where you need somebody else. So I like that to be set up in advance. Now, slightly competition related, but whether it's inter-club league or flying a competition, I like to know the rules and I'd like to know the task objective. What is it that we actually have to do with the task? And if you're just flying cross-country for badge claims, yeah, it's just nice to know the rules. What are the rules for turning points and starting and finishing and distance? On my soaring course 2 years ago, we had the day of the year on the last day, and 2 people lost their 500k because they didn't understand the requirement for start and finish. As simple as that. It was a shame. Yeah, you've obviously got to know about the airspace, what the rules are, what it means. It's nice if you're going to practice to know how to train effectively. And I would say, here's a little pitch. Yeah, you can always prepare by coming on one of my soaring courses at Limpsfield, which is normally an 8 or 9 day course, and this year's is in 2 weeks' time, but it's already fully booked. So, for equipment, well, glider, is the leading edge all right? Is it clean or full of chips? Is it sealed okay? Does the wheel brake work? Just absolutely no point going cross country if you can't trust your wheel brake. And if you're going to fly cross country, you're going to have long flights. You've got to have some sort of peeing system that's going to work for you, because one thing that I know doesn't work well is people who ration what they drink. After a few hours flying, they perform really badly because they're dehydrated. And not only is it poor for performance, but it's potentially dangerous. Take all that stress away just by having some simple way to pee in the glider. Instruments, well, they need to work, and I don't think you can sensibly soar or go cross country without a functioning audio total energy variometer. Obviously the airspeed indicator has to work. You've got to have an altimeter and some basic navigation aids. I mean, it might be as basic as just having a map and being able to read it, which, funnily enough, compared to the days when I started, where we were all quite good at map reading, I fly with a lot of people now that actually can't map read to save their life. And it's quite interesting that I think it's worth, especially for the youngsters, you guys who are now starting out gliding and are starting to go cross country, you might all have electronic gadgets, you might have CU mobile that works on your mobile phone or something like that, but force yourself to learn to map read, because I fly loads of times with people who don't map read. They've got no idea of the basic way they want to go. So we fly out of Nymphsfield, we go off to the northeast. It's obvious, if you draw a line to the northeast of Nymphsfield, whenever you're going in roughly the right direction, the Cotswold Edge, that big hill, must be on your left. But it's incredible how many people leave the thermal and go completely the wrong direction. Yeah, that big river. Should you be seeing that large river when we're supposed to be heading northeast? You know, something like that. So quite easy here, because if you're going east, the sea should be on your right. If you're going west, the sea should be on your left. But you get the gist. And actually, I find it really helps if I can relate the sky I'm seeing to the map to where I want to go, so that when I'm looking ahead, I'm saying, yeah, actually the track line goes somewhere near Basingstoke, and that big cloud, oh yeah, that's near Basingstoke. Yeah, that's the right sort of direction. You know, just so you can navigate on that sort of level without using the electronics. FLARM, of course, is really good. I commend everybody to fly with FLARM if they can. But I'm a great believer in this, the KISS principle. Yeah, it's not what the rugby club does in the bath after the match. It's the keep it simple, stupid principle. I'm not one to clutter the cockpit with gadgets and gizmos, because everything we need for successful soaring is out of the window, outside the aircraft. Databases, yeah, you want the up-to-date databases, turning points in airspace. Some new turning points in the BGA list this year, by the way. IGC flight recorders, if you can, yeah, I mean, okay, there's, you know, a derogation to use a lower level of recorder for a lot of things, but if you're going to fly a comp, you really need IGC flight recorders, and you've got to be sure the fix interval is appropriate. Most recorders now have lots of memory. I'm flying with mine set to 1 second fixes, but that's just what I do. You need batteries and chargers that work. You might need an extension lead if you're going away somewhere, yeah, so that you can actually plug into the one socket that the club has in its workshop and make sure that you can charge all your batteries. Tools and spares, well, I think there's nothing worse than to lose a day's flying because you've got a flat tyre and you can't get a 210 by 65 inner tube anywhere nearby. So some basic spares. I've got inner tube in my trailer. I normally have a main wheel tyre, but I don't on the current glider because it's a tubeless tyre, and that and the wheel costs about £1,000. So that's it. Trailer, it's got to be ready to go, yeah. Tyre should be okay. I towed a trailer for one of my customers a couple of weeks ago, and I had to look at the tyre, and I thought, I'm not taking that on the road. And I told him to come and get it himself, because the tyres were dreadful. So, yeah, brakes, if they work, the lights, has it got a spare tyre? Does it hold the glider safely? And if you've got a glider with water ballast, obviously you need water ballast filling kit, trestles for rigging, tie-down kit, washing kit. Now, it's all basics, but unless you get this stuff together ready for the start of the season, you won't be ready to go. For personal equipment, drinking water, I use Camelbacks. Actually, I carry 2 3-litre Camelbacks when I'm flying, and a lot of flights I drink a lot. So, you know, drinking water is important. Hat, keep the sun off your head. Sunglasses, good ones. Actually, I have one set of sunglasses that I use only for soaring. Serengeti drivers, I got them years ago. They're brilliant, brilliant optics. And I put them on as the last thing I do before I go flying, and when I get out of the glider, I take them off, put them in the bag, and they never get used for anything else. And if like me, you your license says you have to fly with corrective spectacles now, you need some spare ones in the glider. Current map, no good flying on last year's airspace changes. Yeah, we've got some new airspace this year, and it ain't going to get any better. Do you have a PDA? Has it got the right database in it? Usual stuff for flight planning. Pens, rulers, protractor. Who uses that these days? Well, I do. What do I know? So I find it helps, and we talk about visualisation. For me, visualisation is really important. So I draw the task, yeah, pen and a ruler on the map. If I've drawn the task, I can look along the route for airspace either side, not just right on the line, but you might need to detour 10, 20, 30k off track. Have a look at the airspace. Yeah, make sure you know what the airspace is. Particularly if, like me again, I don't like flying with my specs on, so. And I don't want to have to take my lovely sunglasses off to put my specs on to read what the level of the base of this particular piece of airspace is. So if I've done it as homework in advance, and very often I write in big letters 3,500 against the airspace boundary so I can see it. So just that. And then, having looked at the airspace, I'll look at the route and say, well actually the ground's low there, ground's high here, it's likely to be better up, you know, and pick. I'd actually start to visualise where I might fly, where the thermals might be better. So I do really basic flight planning, but it goes right back to real basics like we did in the 1970s. Food bags, yeah. I use that because I like taking food with me, but if you haven't got them, you can't do it. Comfort, have you got cushions, lumbar support, that sort of thing, and a peeing system, all personal equipment. I don't like using other people's. Airspace and altimetry. Do you understand the rules? Do you know where you can fly and where you can't? Use the current map and airspace files. Understand what the altimeter settings mean to you, what the implications are. If you're accustomed to flying on QFE setting, then what adjustment do you need to make to airspace bases that are defined as an altitude? And how do you deal with it when they're defined as a flight level? Are you going to just climb up and wait for the UDI to warn you, or do you actually know? So understand how the altimeter setting affects you. I mean, it's bronze level stuff this, but a lot of people can't do it who are flying cross country. And there's a nice thing, know your local letters of agreement, so you know where you can and can't fly and what to expect when you call whichever air traffic control unit you call in to ask to go in a particular bit of airspace. Some principles of cross-country flying. Yeah, it's not a competition to see who can get highest. So I would always say, don't waste your time striving for maximum height in every week or weakening thermal, but treat your altitude or height just as a tool to get you from here to the next climb and where you want to go. Height is just simply a tool, not an end in itself. And if you treat height as a tool, it means sometimes you'll have lots of it in the tank, sometimes you won't have so much of it in the tank. That in itself doesn't matter, because it's just a tool. But being low isn't necessarily a problem. As I said earlier, I fly from a winch site, take a 1,000-foot winch launch, get away every time. But being low in the wrong place really is a problem. So what you need to do is use your height that you do have wisely to make sure that you don't end up with a lack of it where you shouldn't be. So, you know, it sounds obvious, but what that sometimes means is that you have to avoid getting low in the wrong place by asking the big question we talked about earlier. If it's completely crap ahead and you're climbing up in this rubbish thermal and you ask the big question, am I likely to get something better than this or not? And you look ahead and say, no. Then, no matter how poor the current thermal is, you've got to stay in it and get higher till you come up with a different answer to the big question. But you might have to deviate either side of track, perhaps a big deviation, perhaps 90 degrees. And I've even done complete 180s at times, just to stay in the air, to make sure that I don't get low in the wrong place, so that later on in an hour's time perhaps, when it's recycled, you can get through that area. So you might even consider making a U-turn to avoid getting low in the wrong place. So a little bit on speed to fly. Now most people would be familiar with Macready, and if you don't know what I'm talking about with Macready, you can just pretty much go to any standard gliding textbook. New Soaring Pilot's got a great write-up on it, and other books, Reitman's book, and so on. But in essence, there's an optimum Macready speed to fly, for your climb rates to maximise your average cross-country speed. But in truth, the actual speed you fly by following Macready has much less influence on your cross-country speed you achieve than selecting the correct climbs and routing through the air correctly. That's far more important than the speed you fly. Now, a lot of pilots will fly they kind of instinctively set about half their achieved climb rate as their Macready setting in their gadgets. So you've got a day where you're seeing 4 knots as your average in your centred thermals, and they'll set the gadget to 2 and go flying like that. And it's a perfectly valid way to do it. And actually I could bore you all to death for half an hour and show you why setting half the average climb rate has about 5% theoretical impact on your average speed. That's all. It's nothing in the grand scheme of things. And to be honest, I know what are the sweet spot speeds for my glider. Most gliders, basically most modern gliders, have 2 speeds. It's either desperate and you're going at best glide speed, or it's reasonably good and you're going right at the speed along the polar where the polar suddenly drops away. And you look at pretty much any modern glider, the polar is incredibly flat till it gets to a point where you reach 100 knots or whatever the speed happens to be for your glider, and it drops away. So if conditions are good, you go at that speed, 100, 110, 90, whatever it happens to be for your glider, or it's desperate and you're back at best glide speed. And it's as simple as that. So glider that a lot of people would have, LSA, you'd fly ballasted, fly it all the time around about 90 or 95 on a decent day. Yeah, and that's it. So what I do is I take these 2 sweet spot speeds as my target block speed. And when I leave the thermal, I just accelerate straight to the target block speed. Now I try to make sure I'm flying at that speed before I hit the sink, because accelerating in sink is really costly in terms of height. And then I only vary from that target block speed for prolonged lift or prolonged sink. And if the lift just comes, bang, a bit of lift, I won't change the speed at all. But if we come through the lift and it goes on and on and on and on and on and on, I'll gently let the glider slow down in it, but no big pull up, just a gentle reduction in speed and go on. And one thing that I've observed in flying a lot in competition is that the guys that are really slavishly following Macready, and they're pulling the glider up and then descending like that and pulling up and doing that, they're flying a long way through the air, but not much of it is actually forward. Whereas the ones who vary the speed gently fly more or less an equal distance through the air, but go a long way forward. So I like the block speed type approach to speeds to fly. So yeah, and I find I just vary. It's either nice ahead and I'm doing 100 knots or so, or ooh, don't like the look of that, or ooh, it's a long way to the next climb, and I come back to survival speed and just tiptoe across, and I'm forever gear changing between these 2 positions, and not a lot in between by and large. And what I say is, what's really important is to fly a glider at a speed that gets you to the next potential climb with an alternative option if the next climb doesn't work. I try never to get into a position where I've put all my eggs in one basket, one cloud. I always like to be able to get to the cloud I'm going to, which should work, with another option to go to somewhere else and reach that, which one height to climb away from that. So it's just like a power pilot will fly going to the destination with enough fuel to go to a diversion. As a glider pilot, I go to my destination cloud with enough fuel being height in the tank to get to the alternate if that doesn't work, and that's the way I try to manage the flight. Sometimes it's not possible to manage it that way, but that generally is how I try to manage the flight. When I'm going along selecting climbs, said it earlier, I'll always stop and circle if the climb at first contact appears to be better than the day average, and that's just something that comes, that decision is something that comes with a lot of practice and experience. The more in tune with conditions I am, the more I'm in practice, the easier and better that decision-making process becomes with less mistakes, if you like. But as you get lower, you must be prepared to invest some more time. We talked earlier about time is like money in your bank account. Only invest it if it's wise, but obviously as you get lower, you need to be prepared to invest more time to digging out and centering that elusive thermal to keep you in the game. You've got to continually keep scanning ahead and review the climb rates. This is the climb rate you're currently getting, and ask the big question of yourself regularly. If I leave this thermal now, is there a good chance of getting something better? Yes, I've got to go. No, I've got to stay. Now, we all know that the fastest pilots generally take the strongest climbs, but actually that's not strictly true. Because actually the fastest pilots, by and large, don't take weak climbs, but they don't necessarily take the strongest climbs. Because I've found that to get a really good, effective cross-country speed, deviating far off track for an isolated good climb doesn't always work, and you have to consider the potential investment and return. And I often, on